Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. Following the money behind AI, levers for data center accountability. I am so excited to welcome you to today's webinar, Following the Money Behind AI, Levers for Data Center Accountability. Hopefully, you're in the right spot. I am Whitney Shepherd, one of the co-executive directors of Majority Action, and we're so grateful for you being here. We really want to thank our incredible speakers, our partners, and everyone behind the scenes who's made today's conversation possible. To start us off, before we dive into today's content, I would love to just kick us off with a few logistical notes before we begin. Lovely. So, yeah, just for a few notes for folks, you can read what's on the screen. Today's webinar is being recorded. Closed captioning is available for those who would like to access it. You'll just do that at the bottom at the Zoom toolbar below. We have the question and answer function throughout the webinar. So please drop your questions throughout, and we'll be sure to answer what we can. Of course, we won't be able to get to every question, including the really incredible inputs and questions you all offered in terms of the registration links on what brings you to this space. But we're very grateful for that to be a breathing database, which we can continue to shape programming around and engage you. So thank you so much for those great thoughts, and please continue to send them our way as we continue to hopefully explore pathways of building together. I'm not going to read the disclaimer in detail below, but also just want to start us off by reminding ourselves that today's discussion is educational and should not be considered as investment advice. All right, we can move on. So this will be our agenda today. You'll hear a few opening remarks from myself, and then we'll be able to hear from an incredible panel of speakers following that. And then we really want to leave space for additional questions and answers. Again, we'll continue to follow up. And we also have a call to action that we will be sharing with those of you joining us today that you hope will share with your networks as well. As we ground into the space, I wanted to take a moment to explain and explore why we are here. And we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Radhika, so much. In many ways, many of us here are coming from different walks of life, different points of view, experiences, and coming together around the common questions. How do we keep our communities safe in this moment, strengthen our campaigns, and build a future where people, not just corporations, have a say in what comes next? What new opportunities do we have to organize around our shared interest and therefore our shared goals? And how can we use those shared goals to create planned shared strategies that stem from those shared goals? And so at Majority Action, we really focus largely on how capital moves within our systems and how those affects our daily lives and what those effects mean for institutional investors and how they should be using their seats at the table responsibly, but also for community stakeholders, workers, and laborers who are contributing to our economic system and have a rightful say in the impact of our investments. And so we believe that our systems and our current iteration and our current generations, right? What really needs to be brought into the picture is this idea of corporate capture. This is a quote that comes from Robert Monk's well over a decade ago in 2012 when this quote was stated. And so we can only imagine if this was the current state back then, where our systems have progressed to and evolved to since then, with the continuation of seeing this culture of corporate capture. And so I'll just read aloud the quote on this screen that says, American corporations in particular, we should also be very mindful of the power of American corporations within our global sphere as well. So American corporations have the power to control the rules under which they function and to direct the allocation of public resources. This is not a prediction of what's to come. This is a simple statement of the present state of affairs. Corporations have effectively captured the United States, its judiciary, its political systems, its national wealth, without assuming any of the responsibilities of dominion. And so here at Majority Action, part of our goals is to flip this assumption, right? That there should be responsibilities of this kind of dominion and of this kind of stretch into our lives and into our systems. And so we agree that, again, with this most pressing moment of artificial intelligence upon us, although this technology may be new, the dysfunctional, inequitable, and captured system that is being deployed in is not new for our context. And so we understand actually the development of artificial intelligence as a current front line in the fight against concentrated economic power, which we really think roots are a lot of the that allows for technologies and industries to be Thank you for that note. Hopefully, yeah, I'm not sure where that cut off, but yeah, feel free to, if you can offer in the chat if there, yeah, we should pick up at a certain place. But through this analysis, right, so less so focusing on technology, not as the problem, um, but concentrate in power being here. And so, right, and so when it's deployed in a system that has an imbalance of power, right? Any technology, really, any product that's introduced there has the potential to be scaled for speed and profit over human lives. And so this embeds long-term risks for everyone across, okay, thank you all for the notes. Long-term risks that even go beyond a bubble, which I think a lot of folks are speaking about when we're thinking about AI and finance in particular. Our take here, Majority Action as well, is unless we are able to rein in and rebalance power within corporate ecosystem, the bubble may very well pop. Like a lot of evidence points to that. What does that mean for communities, investors after that? How do we safeguard ourselves and sit in an uncomfortable truth and ensure that we're establishing principles, standards, and regulations that do not allow for us to hit those kinds of walls in the future? And so we can go to the next slide, Radhika, please. What this all means for us. And so you'll hear, again, this is a first part of a longer series that we really hope to ourselves as movement organizers, a lot of us coming from that background, wanting to work with our fellow peers around what does it look like to understand the how capital flows, how finance operates within our current context. I often say I'm not sure how any of us could wrap our hand around our current economics and economic systems without having some like secret adult education school or going to a very particular kind of business school where we're learning about all the new debt tools and trades and private equity, how it's grown, venture capitalism, right? And I definitely was not learning the gist of that in my high school econ class. And so what are the kind of educational systems and processes we can create together to really wrap our heads around where capital lies in our systems and the power that it holds? And so as an organizer as well, some of the definition of power, right, in simplest terms, can be the ability to do something. And so I have the power to bring this pen into view on this screen. And so if we take that definition, we can understand the relationship between power, the ability to do something, and how corporate leaders have used the systems to hoard capital as power. So we really believe that we need to organize our people's capital as in terms of power in order to be a forceful force in this movement. So the core takeaways we want everyone to walk away with in this webinar, hopefully we've done our job if you walk away with this, right, is that real feeling that corporate capture is real and our movement strategies must account for us for this. We also want folks to understand that the data center fights necessitates that, yes, we organize locally, we support and we resource locally, and we need to strategize systemically to have our wins feel longer term and more connected. We think that the most important way and strongest way to do that is by following the money and organizing our own capital, in particular with a focus on the most systemically important corporate and capital actors. So those actors that really whose their decisions and their influence entire markets, entire decisions, and those types of things. And there's often a domino effect. And so if you have a large retailer, like say like Walmart, right, raise its paying rates, then we could also imagine that we could see that across the retail sector largely. We can go to the next slide, please. So this is an illustration of sorts. This is my attempt to reclaim some human design here, but my tree, hopefully it makes as an apparent visual here, but just really wanting to, again, model the corporate, what is behind a corporation in today's day and age. And so if we look at this example, such as let's call it Company X, we will and say this has 3 subsidiaries, perhaps an AI arm of it in this branch. And so you have a large company at the top. You have let's say an AI branch of this company, right? We'll be talking about SpaceX later, so this model is after that. A telecom, communications, and a space company, right? So those are the branches, the 3 branches, which you'll see as 1, 2, 3 here that stand up the tree. But Company X often is what enjoys the fruit. This is the canopies where the trillionaires and billionaires hang out, right? But what really stands this up is the finance. So both capital, private and public capital that are the trunk of the tree. Now, if we look at the root system, this is what we would call where our power lies largely, right? Our labor that builds up these technologies, our dollars, our data, our content that we provide, our environment, our natural resources. And in this model, you'll see there's a shield here, a steel shield here at the bottom that's really stopping the rainwater from reaching the roots. It doesn't allow any of the fruit to go back to return nutrients into the soil. And so we're dealing with a very starved root system, which in the short term, sure, you can maybe enjoy some really fruitful fruit. But the argument that we are trying to make is that a root system, especially the system that upholds the entire forest, again, the, you're missing the forest for the tree. Right. What does it mean to have that kind of shield from public accountability from those who are our root system trying to shield from accountability and really real engagement there? But what that does is that dries out and starves our root system that we all are relying on. Our whole forest relies on, including Company X in this tree. So hopefully that gives a little bit of a breakdown of how we think about corporate power, where we all lie in it. And we'll talk a bit more about, again, how do we activate these centers where we particularly have a lot of power, including in the root system, but also really particularly on this public side of capital. So great. A key part of our building this counter network that really does access the root systems and where we do have power nodes that can be activated is to taking direction and lessons from leaders who are on the ground, like many of you here today, who are facing the first and worst impacts of AI and its infrastructure build out. When a lot of people think about AI, we often pictured Silicon Valley. But one of the most important stories and cities about AI is unfolding hundreds of miles away from Silicon Valley here in Memphis, Tennessee. As we know, some of the world's most powerful technology companies, including xAI, but also Anthropic and Google, are building infrastructure or leasing enormous amounts of computing power in Memphis. This makes this one of those places where these relationships between communities, our corporations, and capital is really being tested in real time. That's why I'm so honored to welcome Amber Sherman to the stage to learn a bit more about what happens when there are minimal corporate guardrails in place, where businesses like xAI can move in and drive profits at the cost of local communities, and how she and other organizers are showing up in the moment. Amber Sherman is lead Tennessee regional organizer for Black Voters Matter Fund, where she works to build Black political power and community accountability in Memphis. Policy professional with a background in grassroots organizing, legal studies, and communications, she has been at the forefront of data center accountability work in the region. She also hosts a website called The Law According to Amber, which we welcome you all to visit and please support. And you can find her on all social media handles at A is for Afro, where she drops really amazing content that we also invite you to follow. Thank you so much, and please help me in welcoming Amber to the stage.
Thanks so much, Whitney.
Yeah, so Amber, I would love to just learn more about, what you all are experiencing there on the ground in Memphis, and particularly how it relates to, yes, corporate presence and impact and influence in your city, and what has y'all's response been in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I want to make sure folks know about the data center being built here by Elon Musk and xAI is that this is all being spearheaded by our Chamber of Commerce, which is supposed to be, the group that's helping to bring businesses here to Memphis, but also supporting small businesses. And instead, they have pivoted to making billionaires richer by helping them bring data centers here and encouraging more folks to bring data centers here for what they're calling the digital delta, going as far as to send mailers out to every business in Memphis saying we can do a training for you to show you how to welcome AI into the community, and help you get contracts as well and get connected to these data centers that are coming here. And so when Elon Musk came here, it was because the Chamber of Commerce helped them to find buildings to buy, helped them to circumvent the public process of not having to hear from the public about how we feel about the data centers or the possible air pollution, and help them to secure those deals to lock all that down. So one of the biggest things that we've been talking about is how like the Chamber of Commerce is this corporate function that's not elected. None of these people are elected officials. They are all regular people who are working at an organization, and how dangerous that is that they have all this power and are able to spearhead bringing these data centers here and polluting our air. And we've been fighting back against xAI since it got here, because we also knew that when they got here, it wasn't just going to be one data center. So yeah, they started with Colossus 1, but now they're on Colossus 4, and they have powered Colossus 1 and are using a power plant in South Haven that's Colossus 3 to power Colossus 2, because they aren't able to use our power grid to continue powering these data centers because it's using so much power. And so instead of doing that, they're also using methane gas turbines that put formaldehyde in our air and dangerous particles that we're ingesting 24/7. It never goes away because they're running the turbines 24/7. And so there's been people on the ground from different organizations like Memphis Communities Against Pollution, Young Gifted and Green, Black Voters Matter. And we've been doing a lot of education campaigns for our community, letting them know like XAI is here. This is what a data center is. This is how this impacts you. This is why you weren't, considered or talked to. There was no public process, and explaining the history of how the Chamber of Commerce is functioning. And then also doing phone banks, canvassing, pushing, policy. We just passed a community benefits ordinance last year, and the report from that on how the money should be spent was just affirmed a week ago. And so now the people who are around XAI will receive like infrastructure support, and different like community upgrades, because we also want to make sure that if y'all going to come in and poison a community, that we're providing them regular doctor's visits. And so a part of the money going to their community is to have home health doctors in the area that are constantly monitoring these people. One, in case, they need to sue, but also, so they know if something is happening to them, because there are no reports or data on how these turbines running consistently could impact people. The only things we know is that they're not good for you. And there's already an F grade for air in the city of Memphis. We've been at an F grade for decades. And people in the area where XAI is, the 38109 zip code, the children there miss the most amount of school because of asthma related illnesses than any other zip code in Memphis. And so we know they're already impacted. We want to make sure that they're continuing to like be monitored and still holding XAI accountable. We've still been pushing for all the data centers to be closed. There's an active lawsuit around the data center in South Haven right now. We've also been pushing our local government to pass an ordinance that would put a moratorium on data centers, and also pass an ordinance that puts like stipulations in place of how they can be, where they can be located, what they can be used for. There's a different ordinance right now going through the Nashville City Council that I modeled this ordinance after. And so we're hopeful that we can, one, pass a moratorium so there can't be any more data centers bought here. And then also put stipulations in place of what kind. Like one of the biggest ones is that you can't have a data center within 100 feet of a school, residential neighborhood, or church, which is where most like you find the most people. Because right now there's no regulations. We don't have any laws on the books in Memphis or in Tennessee around, where data centers can be and how they can operate.
Thank you so much, Amber. Is there anything that you think our larger data center movement can benefit from? I'd also like to hear, yeah, a bit about the challenges or about corporate presence in your path to brokering solutions. Just yeah, what has it been like with the corporate engagement side of things? Yeah, and anything else you'd like to share on that end?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main corporate engagement I've seen is really from SpaceX, and like them trying to recruit folks here so they can have a successful IPO. And so they brought about 150 investors to Memphis a few weeks ago, and we actually went to the hotel where they were and did an action there, telling them like, hey, just so you know, before you invest in this, this is what it's doing to our community. And we made actual pamphlets to give out to people so they knew the impact of the turbines, and a lot of folks did not know about it. Like a lot of people there didn't even know how it's impacting the community. And so I think that one of the biggest ways we've been trying to really intervene is seeing those choke points of where we can get to folks in the finance sector and say, like, hey, as a corporation, you should not invest in this. If you say you have sustainability practices, this definitely goes against them, because they're using turbines that are poisoning our air. They're using our water. They're using over 800,000 gallons of water a day. And it's probably more now because the last wave we got was from the December months. So now that we're in the summer, we know they're probably using more. And they've already pulled back on a water reuse facility they were supposed to build so they can get off of our aquifer. And so that's also really hindering us, because these corporations that we're, also targeting haven't stood up against the data centers. And so I think the biggest thing is educating them on how it's impacting us, pushing them to make statements, pushing them to talk about divesting and how, we shouldn't add this to our financial portfolio. We also should not be championing this. Like there's a org here that's going to partner with Starlink, which is an Elon Musk company. And we, approach them like, hey, this is not a good idea for you as a corporation. This company is attached to this data center that's poisoning our community. And they heard us and they canceled that partnership. So I think the main way we're really doing things to make a difference around corporations and how they operate is like intervening at any intersection when there's something brought up that's in partnership with Elon Musk or in support of the data centers.
That's wonderful, Amber. Yeah, that's a really great point that we'll definitely be building off of. Yeah, and before, yeah, thank you so much for your remarks. Is there any last wisdom or thing you want to offer the crowd in terms of, yeah, when you look at our larger data center movement and beyond Memphis, what do you think that we, really can benefit from, and what's on your wish list there?
I think the main things we can benefit from is being proactive, because we didn't have ordinances in place, and most places don't around where data centers can be. They can be near anyone and near any community and schools. And so I think being proactive and also pushing for corporations to take the side of the people as well, to also use their power as corporations in your community to say, hey, we should pass some local ordinances or we should have some regulations because we're a good actor in the community and we don't want someone coming in that's going to impact our ability to be a thriving business because the people are getting sick or they're moving.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Amber. It was so great to have you on. We look forward to welcoming you back for the question and answer section. Please follow Amber on socials and on the online. We've dropped those links in there. Yeah, thank you so much, Amber. Look forward to coming back to Q&A. Great. So I want to just take a moment, yeah, for us all to reflect and one, honor, recognize, and celebrate the incredible organizing that we're seeing coming out of Memphis, and what does it really mean to grapple with a corporate entity such as SpaceX and XAI that are able to blow past guardrails and again regulations and really be strategic around what that means and what kind of counterpower is needed to meet that force. We're very honored to be starting our journey and wondering if we as a Majority Action Shop can help leverage some of the capital strategies and power that we have in our shop to these existing campaigns and really leverage and align campaign goals with organizable capital, which we'll talk about in a bit here too. So I think one of the most what also Memphis helps us understand is how organizing in our communities and in place is what helps us see something also much bigger and what is beyond us. So we really begin to understand what happens in our neighborhoods is not a result of just local decisions, right? It's connected to decisions being made in these corporate boardrooms, in investment committees, in financial institutions, hundreds or thousands of miles away from your community, which are still impacting your daily lives. So place basing our fights and learning from those examples and those leaders really helps us clearly see power and how it flows and what we again can do to build counter power and communal power to help address the concentrated power we are facing. So this really helps us trace who gets the benefits, who bears the risks, and where accountability has broken down. So thank you again. Shout out to Memphis and the incredible leadership on the ground there. Really a lot of lessons to learn from in the data center fight. And we look forward to also continuing to build some bridges of more financial levers of power as well to see what success we can have there that we also imagine will to be scalable to the broader data center fight. So I also want to just reflect on this trend that we are trying to pull out to participants within this webinar. I'll ask Radhika to throw up the poll that we would love for participants to answer, just to test one, who's in the room, but also to test our understanding of what we're pitching here, right? Like, are you an organizer in this timeline in this 21st century? Have you yourself experienced a moment where concentrated corporate power felt like it undermined a win or even blocked it? And yeah, so we're looking forward to engaging your responses there. I'll give you a second to respond. So yeah, thinking about your own experience, we look forward to reviewing that data. So what do we do when corporate capture, if these results are coming in and we do see that corporate capture has drained our society largely of effective accountability mechanisms or ones that can have sustainable and long-term value to them? I think we all know, I'm preaching to the choir, we organize and we strategize back, but it really does matter how we strategize back. So again, our angle that to organize locally and strategize systemically, we need to really bring capital and finance into the picture. That is where I'll bridge us to, and that my colleague Divya will take us into deeper. All right, we will end the poll here. And so we have great, about 76% of the audience has said yes, they have had an experience where corporate concentrated power has felt like it's undermined or blocked or affected one of their campaign wins. And then we asked you all, how often are you applying a capital flows and analysis to your organizing plans and strategic maps? Yeah, there's a wide range of folks in the audience, right? So folks are often, sometimes, rarely leveraging them. We don't have anyone with never. That's great. That's great. We'd love to see more of this leveraging. And so we have a good mix of people. And we, again, are not Majority Action has immense value and humility for other partners in the field who lever these kinds of strategies. We're learning together. We are not by no means the only shop that does so. So I think what we are trying to though figure out is how can we have more coordination around those of us leveraging strategies towards more systemically important actors that we believe have the most impact in making systemic change. So some of the most successful movements also have understood that we can't only organize where harm and symptoms and dysfunction show up, right? We have to organize where that power that's driving that is concentrated. So I want to just root us in some of the legacy where we've seen capital strategies and again, pulling financial levers of power really activated and where we owe a lot of honor and respect to where these traditions come from. Should come as no surprise, right? In the civil rights movement, organizers and researchers such as those at the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, they would map relations between those businesses, just as we've heard, Memphis doing some of this work, others on the ground here. So relationships between those businesses as well. The chambers of commerce, the political power to understand where those decisions were being made and then applying that to their campaigns. The Montgomery bus boycott was also not simply about refusing bus rides, right? It was an economic and capital strategy, which really challenged the economic relationships that were sustaining segregation. And used withholding capital as a lever to affect systemic change. Another popular example when we're talking about what does it mean to also, organize public capital, we're not necessarily interested in the capital that has no interest in moving, right? That may have already made it very clear. But what are the organizable pension, funds where that's managing our own workers' capital, our retirement funds, our tax money, the money that we give to the government, where we do have power and ownership power is really we're trying to awaken. And there's a lot of, faith-based investors, right, that do have moral and social responsibility as a part of their investment beliefs that we also need to be activated in this moment. The apartheid movement in South Africa was an incredible example of this, where we did see institutional investors come together and inspired by movement on the ground, such as you all, to really use their capital to divest from an apartheid state. So those are just some tangible examples we wanted to offer to you all in terms of as we kind of, there's a lot of jargon when it comes to finance and we are switching a lot of it, but we look forward to kind of continuing to develop shared language and approaches with you all. So we're really asking what lens can we bring to our own fight with this in mind, with the past histories of what we've seen to be effective, and how can we, again, use capital to strategize systemically as a through line that connects all of our struggles that we are, facing right now due to the AI boom and other, again, compounding risks of concentrated power. What we also focus on here is which actors have the most systemic significance in the AI boom. How can we locate our beyond strategy here? Those are the questions that really guide our work and exactly where we're headed next. So again, if we think about the metaphor of the tree, not all trees are created equal or the same shape, right? Some trees are huge in this forest, taking up a lot of the resources, choking out our foundational systems, and yet because they have concentrated so much power, attention on them, pressure on them, right? Being able to shift their behavior and influence really has the ability to shape full markets. And so if you're concerned around AI in general and the rapidness of its build out, but the company in your backyard may not be one of the tech giants, we still invite us again to strategically have systemic strategies, because we do believe the domino effect, if we get to move one of these key players, that also has impacts and ripple effects across the field. Yeah, we're really excited to help expand our toolbox with this understanding. And on that note, I'm really excited to introduce my colleague, Divya Sundar, who will walk us through what systemically significant AI financing looks like in this moment, who the key actors are, and why organizing around those actors can create leverage that extends far beyond any one single data center fight or campaign. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Divya.
Thank you, Whitney. Just a heads up, I am getting over a cough, so that's why my voice sounds like this, and I may be taking frequent sips of water. Um, yeah, so I'm really excited to talk to you all today, give you a kind of bird's eye view of the corporate structure of SpaceX, the money behind SpaceX, the actors that provide this company money, and then figuring out together how we can leverage this information to aid the broader data center fight. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've talked about XAI, we've talked about SpaceX. So before we get going, I just really want to make sure that we're all kind of clear on who the different corporate entities are here. xAI, as I'm sure all of you know, is Elon Musk's AI company. It was founded after Elon Musk and Sam Altman got into a fight and diverged paths. xAI's chatbot Grok is embedded in X now. But xAI was founded in 2024. A year later, Elon Musk merged xAI with X for $33 billion. And between 2024 and 2026, xAI raised about $47 billion in the private markets. And we'll talk more about the private markets in a minute. In February 2026, Elon Musk merged xAI into one of his other companies, SpaceX, which at the time was a rocket and satellite company, for $250 billion. And as Amber spoke to, in June 2026, SpaceX went public. And it went public in the largest initial public offering in history. It raised more than $85 billion. It hit a $2 trillion market cap, which made it more valuable than Meta, than Berkshire Hathaway, than Walmart, and famously it minted Elon Musk as the world's first trillionaire. Okay, so I want to start by just getting clear on the corporate structure of SpaceX. So SpaceX consists of three segments. There's the rocket segment. So this is literally the launch business where SpaceX, usually through government contracts, launches rockets into space. There's a satellite business, which is Starlink that Amber spoke to. And there's the AI segment, which is really xAI. And the three things I really want to drive home here is that the AI segment is losing the most money. That's what the chart on the upper right shows you. You can see that both the rocket segment and the AI segment are losing money. The satellite segment is the only profitable segment of SpaceX. The AI segment needs the most capital of any of the segments, and yet it is core to SpaceX value proposition and success. So SpaceX's kind of astronomical $2 trillion valuation is driven in part by this pretty wild claim that the total addressable market is the total amount of revenue that the company could meet is over $28 trillion, which is just around a little bit under what the US GDP is. It's a pretty astronomical figure. As you can see here, 26.5 trillion of that 28.5 trillion is supposed to come from the AI segment. So at the end of the day, everything rests on AI. Next slide. So in one of SpaceX's IPO filings, they lay out what are the key strategies they need to pursue in each of these segments in order to meet this $29 trillion total addressable market. And I want to point you to what they say about the AI segment. The two things they say is, one, they plan to deploy orbital data centers. This is the thing that has gotten a lot of excitement from investors, as well as drawn a lot of skepticism from critics. But the other thing they say is they need to increase scale of terrestrial AI compute infrastructure. The other way of saying that is that they need to build more data centers on Earth, and they need to build them in Memphis. So the reason I say all of this is to just say that local data center fights, because they're often very siloed, they're very place-based, they are often seen as very ancillary to the lofty aspirations of AI companies who are seeking to disrupt the world, right? In the case of SpaceX, they're seeking to make humans multiplanetary. That's part of like the mission statement of the company. But the reality is that the ability to build data centers on Earth in our communities is absolutely critical to their ability to live up to investor expectations. And so that's just like a way of kind of talking about and getting to just how much power our movements have if we can figure out how to unlock it. As Whitney said, corporate actors do not act in isolation. So when we are embarking on a data center fight that's located in our communities, we are often very focused on the specific facilities and the specific companies that sit in those facilities, right? So Colossus 1, Colossus 2, Colossus 3, the power plant in South Haven, Mississippi. The reality is that corporations are not standalone figures. They are enabled by and dependent on an ecosystem of financial and corporate actors that provide them capital. And this is especially true in the capital-hungry AI sector. They are really dependent on investors and other kinds of financial market makers. And each capital market actor exerts power in different ways and responds to different incentives and pressures. So as organizers, one of the things we want to think about is who are the capital market actors that we can bring on sides to be able to put pressure on the decision makers. Okay, so what I want to do is kind of take you on the arc of SpaceX, from when it was a private company to now a public company. So XAI for many years, not many years actually, only 2 years, was a private company. And private companies are funded in a variety of ways, but the primary ways that AI companies are funded are through venture capital and private equity funds. So venture capital and private equity managers, they're called general partners, pool capital provided by a variety of different institutional investors. That includes public pension funds like CalPERS or CalSTRS. This is the pension fund that is attached to your local teachers union, to university endowments, such as like the Harvard Endowment or the University of Michigan Endowment, and foundation endowments, as well as other kinds of institutional investors, such as family offices and sovereign wealth funds. So this graphic on the right, if you're able to see it, basically looks at looks at a number of public pension funds that are invested in major VC funds that participated in fundraising rounds for XAI. And you can see there's some of the biggest pension funds in the world are on this list. CalPERS, CalSTRS, the New York City pension funds. And the reason I'm talking so much about pension funds and the reason that university and foundation endowments are highlighted here is because we think of these investors as organizable investors. So of course, all investors want to maximize returns, but public pension funds, university endowments, foundation endowments have an implicit public mandate or public responsibility, right? So in the case of public pension funds, for example, they manage the capital of public sector workers whose salaries are paid in part by taxpayers. In terms of foundations, many of us are funded by nonprofits for our data center accountability work or our AI accountability work, but their investment arms, the investment arms of these foundations may unknowingly be invested in the very corporate actors we're trying to resist. So again, these we think are organizable investors. We want them on side, and these kinds of investors are often first movers when it comes to taking bold investor action on corporate accountability. Okay, so June 2026, SpaceX goes public. First, why do companies go public? So companies go public because they need to raise money. And as I said, the AI sector is capital intensive. All of these frontier labs are going IPO because they need to make money to win the AI arms race. So SpaceX was the first, but we know the OpenAI IPO is coming, the Anthropic IPO is coming. Now, what's an IPO? Essentially, an IPO is when a company issues shares at a particular price, and that's how investors buy those shares, and that's how the company raises money. Now, the process of taking a company IPO is managed by investment banks who take a fee for their services. So there were 23 investment banks that were involved in the SpaceX IPO, and they received a total of $500 million in fees. The investment banks that were like kind of the most prominently involved their logos are featured here. What do these investment banks do? Essentially, what they do is they market the company to institutional investors. So this is what Amber was referring to, right? They host roadshows where big institutional investors like pension funds show up and hear the company's pitch, hear the investors' pitch. They set the share price, and they allot a certain amount of shares to interested investors at the IPO price. So in the case of SpaceX, the IPO price was $135 per share. Now, who participates in an IPO? Who actually gets the allocation from the investment banks? So this includes a wide range of institutional investors, including pension funds, including endowments. In the case of SpaceX, we also saw a huge allocation towards retail investors, so everyday investors who are able to buy in. You can imagine, given what I've just told you, multiple campaigns that can come out of even just understanding this ecosystem, right? So the big investment banks that underwrite these IPOs, these are household names. Many of us, because of their retail banking segment, like bank with them. So they have kind of name recognition that can really serve as a useful kind of starting point for some kind of corporate campaign. And they're also behind pretty much every IPO. You can also imagine a campaign where a big institutional investor refuses to participate in an IPO allocation. We did not really see any proclamations of that with US pension funds, but there were European pension funds who did say explicitly that they were not going to participate in the SpaceX IPO. So what happens once a company is public? Well, its equities trade on the public market, and that's one thing. And then the other thing you can do is it can issue corporate bonds on the public market. The long and the short is it's very likely that a company like SpaceX will end up in your portfolio, whether you want it or not. If you have a defined benefit pension plan, your pension fund will probably purchase both SpaceX equities and bonds. That's because public pension funds are what we call universal owners. They own basically the entire market in order to diversify and reduce risks. If you have a 401k or you have a 529 plan for your child or your grandchild, you are probably invested in SpaceX through low-cost index funds or target date funds. So these are funds that track indices, which are basically like a tracking mechanism that attach to a set of securities that rank a set of securities based on some characteristics like market capitalization. Now, a company as big as SpaceX is likely to make its way into equity and bond indices, and the stock will eventually find its way into your portfolio. This is a phenomenon that some corporate governance scholars have called forced capitalism or forced buying, where everybody, retail investors, everyday investors everyday workers are forced to basically buy into the market. I'm going to kind of go fast here, but one major thing I really want to drive home is that it is kind of widely acknowledged that AI billionaires, tech companies have captured our political systems and our economic systems. If you're fighting a data center in your backyard, you know how they've captured local politics, local economic development. But it's also true that AI billionaires have captured shareholder democracy and corporate governance and eroded the rights of shareholders. So I'm not going to go through everything here, but one thing I do want to note is that once you become a public company, your shareholders have certain rights. Those include being able to elect the board of directors, vote for shareholder proposals, file lawsuits in the case of misconduct by one of your directors or the company itself. SpaceX has basically structured itself so that shareholders do not have any of these rights. Elon Musk controls 82% of voting power, which means he controls the entire composition of the board and pretty much all vote outcomes. Similarly, you cannot file a shareholder class action lawsuit against SpaceX. All lawsuits have to be litigated in a forum that is favorable to SpaceX. So these are some of the ways in which we see kind of corporate capture happening within the shareholder and investor ecosystem. And it's also something that you can organize investors against, as the kind of headline from Reuters suggests. We can skip the next slide, Radhika, and go to the question of who benefits from the IPO. I'm going to move really fast here, but one thing I just want to know, this is a really crude back of the envelope way of being able to illustrate who really benefits from the IPO. The blue here, the big astronomical numbers are people who benefited from the IPO, like Elon Musk, like major venture capital firms, public pension plans who were invested in those firms, endowments who got in early, the investment banks underwriting the IPO. You can see how big those numbers are in comparison to the very, very paltry numbers that we see in terms of what communities in Memphis are actually getting back for having these data centers in their backyard. So we talked a lot about like financial actors. I want to talk a little bit about other corporate actors that are embedded in the SpaceX ecosystem. There is intense competition for chips and compute. And that means that there is incredible financial interdependence between AI and tech firms. So I'm not going to go into everything on the slide, but one thing to note is that both Google and Anthropic, as you probably know, are paying SpaceX over $2 billion a month in order to rent compute from its data centers in Memphis. Why am I bringing this up? Well, first of all, these companies need each other. If you recall, like SpaceX's AI division is losing massive amounts of money. They need the revenue. On the other hand, Google and Anthropic need the compute. So these companies are they're interlocked. And it also means that some of these companies may be easier, what we might call campaign targets than SpaceX. Anthropic, for example, bills itself as a safe and responsible AI company. Similarly, Google made its name as a company that stands up its data centers using clean energy. It actually is building a big data center campus in West Memphis powered by 1 gigawatt of solar and battery. And so these are these differences between corporations can be effectively leveraged by campaigners in order to exact concessions and to improve corporate standards. So what are the implications here for data center fights? So I've basically kind of populated this graphic for you. You know, we started off with these like very site specific kind of fights, right? Centered around Colossus 1, Colossus 2. And what we see is if we zoom out, there are a whole cast of capital market, financial, and corporate actors that embolden and make possible SpaceX as a bad corporate actor. Again, what are the implications for us here? Well, capital market actors can put pressure on other key decision makers that you are trying to move in your local data center fight. We can organize capital market actors that have some kind of public or responsible mandate, like public pension funds or university and foundation endowments, faith-based investors. There are key points of leverage that we can exploit, including upcoming IPOs, equity and debt issuances, and manager selection, whereby public pension funds or other big institutional investors decide which managers they want to manage their private investments. And ultimately, the point I want to drive home is that once we begin to kind of zoom out, we see that our fights are really interrelated. That once you begin to kind of incorporate some of these other actors into your fights, you can see how we can connect and scale different data center campaigns. So, you know, every single one of these actors that I have identified here are implicated in more than one data center fight. And so bringing them into the fight allows us to kind of unify our respective campaigns. And I'm actually going to leave this for Whitney to talk about because we want to hear from our last speaker.
Great. Yeah. But while it's up on the screen, y'all, it'll be a call to action. What we'll lead with, and we can drop it in the chat already, Jason, is this. Yeah. If this analysis has been resonant with you, if the call to focus on systemically significant actors in this AI organizing, we are going to ask, that you sign on. This one, still is place-based and local, and really trying to move Anthropic as a corporate player to do something around the exacerbation and harms that XAI is driving as they do business with them. And so really trying to call account around that. But I'll give a bit more details at the end here. We do want to bring our next speaker onto the screen, who we're really, really grateful to have here as well. Jasmine, I'll have to cut your bio short, but just wanted to introduce Jasmine Gill of Hip Hop Caucus. She is the Think 100% Associate Senior Director there. She's a dedicated advocate for climate and environmental justice and a deep-rooted commitment to empowering communities that are impacted. She's born and raised from South Carolina, so her upbringing also definitely roots her in her passion for advocacy and social justice. Jasmine, so excited to welcome you to the screen, and appreciate you being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. So great to be in community with you all.
And Jasmine, because we are short on time, I'm just kind of, I'll kick you to the general question, but really wanting to learn and glean from Hip Hop Caucus, who has leveraged some of these financial levers of power within their campaigns, kind of greatest successes, top lines that you would like to offer to this audience. And anything else that, feels relevant, that'd be great. And if we can just use a few minutes at the end for call to action and wrapping, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, of course. Hello, everyone. I lead the climate and environmental justice work at Hip Hop Caucus. Unfortunately, my colleague, Stefan Coward, couldn't be here, who leads the financial side of this work as well, and how our work is heavily intertwined. First and foremost, I like to say that how the caucus views this work is we follow the money and then we redirect the money. And so one of the key portions of our work lives under our Bank Black and Green campaign, under our Justice Paid in Full platform, which essentially redirects money from the fossil fuel industry and divest money from mass incarceration back into community. We've done this work for many, many years across the fossil fuel industry work, and there is a clear through line between what has happened for many years with the fossil fuel industry and what is happening now with data centers. And so it just became a natural progression for us to be doing that work. We know that this equates to higher energy bills, more environmental harm that you all know so well and have been fighting so much on. And we also know that there are clear connections to those industries using the same playbook. And so how we see our work is remaining the same regardless of what the fight is around. And so For us, that really, really means removing their social license to operate. We've done that through campaigns like the Costco credit card campaign, essentially that removes Citibank as a company holder for Costco who claims to be an ethical partner to community. And so I bring that up as an example because what I'm really trying to connect with you all on is the fact that in general, when we use third party strategies such as removing who their financiers are, removing who their impact investors are, targeting these financial institutions, it really does lean towards the overall impact of removing their social license to operate within community and within these institutional agencies. So, because we're short on time, I'm happy to connect with you all more on what that looks like in practice for Hip Hop Caucus. But in general, that's how we see ourselves in the fight and how it's translated from our fossil fuel work now to how we progress into the data center fight.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. I know that was a quick, and I really appreciate you, working within our time constraints. But Hip Hop Caucus is a core partner of ours. We sit at a table that meets monthly on these capital strategies, and really putting our heads together and sharing best notes. What we, often talked about with Stefan as well is how do we expand that table, right? How do we really, again, use that as a table and a space to strategize systemically? And so I think your segue actually touching on Costco is a perfect example, right? How do we also see leverage points for companies who are publicly stating their values and really holding them accountable to that? And so we again see a similar opportunity, and if we can put the call to action on the screen, that would be great. Just exactly, right? So we're seeing also on the similar sides of Anthropic representing itself as more socially aligned, I think, and especially concerned around the war machine. And I'm not sure if folks saw the actual recent news of XAI and the potential for Department of Defense to intervene within an existing lawsuit against the company, claiming that XAI is critical to the war in Iran. And so again, there's so many ties here, so many things that if you care about being able to have more coordination on where we're coordinating our power feels really imperative. And so that's what we're asking you all to do today. This is the first on many arcs, but how do we again understand how we can show up for Memphis, even if we don't live there, and say, is there any other ways on our power map that we should be looking at and trying to leverage in order to stop the immediate and most felt harms in terms of the gas turbines and the presence, but also lock in those longer term solutions and distribute our political and economic power that again has been so captured by corporations over the years. So our theory again remains, if we organize just locally but fail to organize systemically, we can always be chasing the next fight. So how do we continue to organize capital and systemically significant actors, and that opening up to the opportunity to change the rules for everyone? So as we close out today, we'd like to invite you to put this framework into practice. You've heard us talking about throughout this webinar what it looks like to strategize systemically. So with this petition, if you click on this link, we're asking for your signature. We're asking you to share this out with your lists. We're asking you to, really go out and get this message to Anthropic's leadership that we see that they are doing business with one of the worst actors out there, and that definitely they have an opportunity to use their own corporate power to make some demands of this company. So we're not simply asking Anthropic to change its course. We're asking one of the world's most systemically significant AI companies that, again, a lot of has gained a lot of traction from positive PR, to recognize that who they choose to partner with in business, such as XAI, and where they are sourcing their compute power, that has real consequences for communities, and that they need to, in speaking to some of the organizers on the ground, in Memphis as well, right? Like, what does it look like to have a corporation like XAI who blew past real, true community engagement in a lot of ways, right? How could Anthropic come in and fill that gap? How can they as a company demonstrate that they are different in their approach and that they will sit down with community stakeholders and deeply hear the concerns of where they're leasing their compute power, right? So can we as a movement use this opportunity to shift some corporate behavior here that, again, that would serve and add value to all of our fights and bring us together here. So every signature here helps us demonstrate that we are connecting these dots between the local impacts and between the global systems of capital that are driving them. And if this lesson has resonated with you today, again, we are asking you to sign on to this petition, help us spread the word, help us get as many signatures as possible, and really force a response from Anthropic. I think with that, we will do not have time for questions and answers. We really appreciate everyone's grace and working with us. Obviously, it's a lot of information to want to share with folks, but we do feel like it's an important call to put out into the movement as we're continuing to see incredible wins at local levels. But yet on the same hand, continuing seeing so many of those wins under threat by, again, the concentration of power. We hope to serve as an organization that helps to really truly build that power beyond our borders, that helps fortify our movements and our solutions for a long time to come. So I was recently reminded by a leader named Rakia Adams that through her observation, she was reminded that we are not in a collective endeavor. That really struck me at my core, and it really has invited us to ask, how do we take up a challenge and rebuild a collective endeavor, right? How do we rebuild our collective power in order to manifest brighter futures for us all? So it's not about grandiosity. Grandeur doesn't have to be huge, sacrificial acts. There can be really small acts, such as signing a petition, such as sharing this webinar, such as sending us your questions, and yeah, we really look forward to following up with you all, and thank you again for joining us. And until next time.